Chairman, we're now live.
Okay, good evening, and if I can bring this meeting to order, thank you. A warm welcome to those attending the Major Applications Planning Committee and our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. My name is Councillor Steve Tuckwell and I am the Chairman of this committee. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible online underneath the live broadcast. For those present in the room this evening and intending to speak, please note that you will be filmed and any statements that you make will be recorded and made public. A reminder to anyone speaking today that your voice will only be audible online if the microphone is switched on. In terms of fire alarms this evening, we are not expecting any emergency evacuation, so if the alarm does go off, then I'd ask if you can please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. For mobile tablets and devices, I could ask if you could have those switched off or to silent, but people will note that officers and some members do have tablets in front of them to view the agenda paperwork for this evening. Okay, in terms of, there's a lot of people around the table here today, so I'm going to do some introductions, and I'm going to start off with Councillor Rita Chamdale. Good, welcome to you. We've also got Councillor Roy Chamdale as well. We've got Councillor Cawthorne, and we've got Councillor Dott, we've got Councillor Gaelic, and Councillor Gill. So for those watching this evening, those are the voting members of this evening's meeting. But we're also joined by a team of Hillingdon Council officers, and I will now introduce those. So I've got Mandip Malhotra, our Major and Strategic Planning Applications Manager, Alan Tilley, our Highways and Transport and Highways Development Manager. We've got Chris Brady, Principal Planning Officer, Ed Lawton, who's our Strategic Planning Officer. We're also joined by Richard Phillips, who is also a Principal Planning Officer. We've got Shihar Ashard, Senior Planning Lawyer, and we've got Liz Penny, Democratic Services Officer. We will be joined later by Glenn Egan, who is the Head of Legal Services. He will be joining us a bit later on in the meeting. Okay, right, that's the introductions and Chairman's announcements concluded. We can now go into the main body of the agenda, and we'll start with apologies for absence for tonight's meeting, Liz.
Yes, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Adam Bennett, with Councillor Rita Chamdale substituting this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and a special thank you to Councillor Rita Chamdale for stepping in as a substitute. Welcome this evening. Okay, agenda item 2 is declarations of interest in matters before this meeting this evening. Any declarations? Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you, Chairman. In respect of agenda item 7, I understand that I actually know the applicant, therefore I have a non-pecuniary interest and I will withdraw from the meeting while that item is considered. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll make a note of that, and then we'll escort you back in once that application has been determined. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 3 this evening is to agree the minutes of the previous meeting of the 18th of May. Those minutes are on pages 1 to 5 of the agenda bundle. Any comments on the minutes of the last meeting? Alan, do you want to come in on that?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. The officer's report for the Hyatt Hotel development considered by committee on May the 18th was approved subject to the recommendation that a £160,000 contribution should be secured to be used towards active travel zone improvements in the local area, specifically to address walking and cycling deficiencies on the northern side of the Uxbridge Road. An opportunity to provide a better crossing facility over Springfield Road on the southern side of the Uxbridge Road has since emerged. This has been discussed with colleagues in Legal Services and Democratic Services, who advise that to allow the contribution to be invested in the Springfield Road crossing facility, the minutes should be changed with the addition of the following text. Further noting that £160,000 as a financial contribution to be used towards active travel zone improvements in the vicinity of the site. So instead of saying on the northern side of Uxbridge Road, we say in the vicinity of the site, which gives us a lot more flexibility to invest the money specifically on the crossing facility that's since been identified. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. And if you want to jump in there, Mandip?
So I would just add that we have had conversations with the applicant to, obviously the heads of terms are their money, it's their contribution, and they are agreeable to the change that we're tabling this evening.
Okay, and I think just for clarification, it's not a change of what the decision was. It's just to sort of just to be more specific around what the minutes actually say and reflect what was actually discussed at the meeting. So, are we happy to make those changes? Councillor Cawthorne, did you want to come in?
Just on a process point, that's all. So are we reporting this as a matter that was discussed at the last meeting, or is it in effect an addendum to the minutes that as something that's happened subsequently? Is it the latter, just to be clear?
It is the latter.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'll just check with our legal officer. Is that all okay? You happy with that? Yeah? Okay. So, I know not everybody was at the last meeting, but are we happy to make those changes as being outlined by Alan?
Agreed.
Agreed? Okay, we can take those as agreed, and thank you for taking those through that, Alan. Right, we have an additional set of minutes to talk about, which is agenda item 4, which is to agree the minutes of the previous meeting, which was the appointment of the chair and vice chair of this meeting. Can I take those as agreed? Agreed? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 5 is matters notified in advance, which there are none. And agenda item 6 is just to confirm public and private reports. This entire meeting this evening will be in part 1. There are no part 2 private items. The agenda items will be taken in the order published, and there is one petition each item this evening, which is agenda item 7. Okay, thank you. Right, that concludes the first part of the agenda. We can now go into the actual applications themselves, which is agenda item 7, Hayden House, 296 Joel Street, Northwood Hills. Who's taking us out on this one? Is it you, Chris? Okay, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Before we start the presentation, I would like to draw members' attention to the addendum, which provides an update following the submission of an e-petition and the number of signatures submitted on the original petition. In terms of the description of development, it is as shown on the screen. It's for the demolition of the existing building and construction of a 4-storey building comprising of 13 residential units, including associated landscaping works, provision of bicycle and bin storage and car parking space, following the approved change of use under the reference number which is shown on screen. Here we have the location plan. The site is located on the western side of Joel Street, close to the junctions with Durlings Drive, and accommodates an existing 2-storey office building. The main access fronts onto Joel Street, with parking provided towards the rear. The local area is predominantly residential in character, and the site is located adjacent to the Eastcote Village Conservation Area. You'll see the conservation area hatched in yellow, although you might not quite see it as yellow on the screen. It is just to the east and northeast of the site. The site is identified as being partly located within flood zones 2 and 3, which the Council's strategic flood risk assessment shows is to be at risk of future flooding. In terms of planning history, the site does benefit from prior approval consent for the change of use from Class E to C3 residential accommodation for the provision of 6 self-contained flats, which was granted in November 2022. I'll just take you through the plans. So here we have a existing site plan, and this is an existing site plan from the prior approval, illustrating the introduction of some soft landscaping. No, sorry, here we go. This is the prior approval site plan, which shows some introduction of some soft landscaping and formalisation of the car park. You've got an existing first floor and roof level plan, existing roof plan, existing elevations and sections, and some further existing elevations and sections. In terms of the proposed building, this would be 4 stories in height and would occupy a large proportion of the site area. I'll take you now through the proposed plan. So here you have a proposed site plan which shows the parking towards the rear and a retention of a small proportion of the landscaping to the western edge of the site. Here you have a ground and first floor plan, which also indicates the internal layouts of each of the units. proposed second and third floor plans, roof plan, and here you have some proposed elevations, side elevation, and you'll have a bird's eye view plan here, just an aerial photograph, and here we have some photos. So this is number 31 Deerings Drive, which directly abuts the site. Joel Street looking north, Joel Street looking south, the East Coast Conservation Area. So this is taken from directly outside the front of the site, so it shows how close the conservation area actually is to the site. Photo of the existing side entrance, south view of the site, which shows the southern boundary. Okay. With regards to the principal development, whilst the intensification of the C3 use of the site would provide additional housing within a residential area, the site lies within flood risk zone 2 and 3, and the application proposes a development which would have a larger footprint than the existing building. As such, in accordance with the development plan, the applicant is required to submit a sequential test indicating that there are no other sites which would be sequentially preferable, for example, sites which are located within areas of a lesser flood risk. Whilst the LPA accepts that there is an extant prior approval on the site permitting the conversion of the office to residential use, the proposal would introduce an additional built form, and the applicant has failed to demonstrate that this would not result in an increase in local flood risk. Furthermore, the Council's delivery of a 5-year housing land supply steers the need for utilising sites of a greater flood risk away from housing development in flood risk areas. In addition, it is noted that the proposal fails to provide an adequate level of family-sized housing in an unsustainable location with no reasonable justification. As such, the principle of development is not considered to be acceptable. Turning to the design of the development. Given the site's location adjacent to the East Coast Conservation Area, the proposal is required to be designed in such a way that it would not result in detrimental harm upon this heritage asset. The proposal would introduce a taller building with a greater footprint in comparison to the existing building. The local pattern of development comprises of perimeter blocks with large gardens to the rear, whereas the proposed new building would occupy a significant proportion of the site area. The roof design appears to be awkward, with chamfered corners towards the boundary lines and flat tops. These design features result in a building which would fail to integrate within the street scene and would harm the character and appearance of the heritage asset. The proposed building would extend almost up to the boundary line shared with number 31 and 30 Deerings Drive, resulting in a separation distance of 6 to 9 metres. Furthermore, whilst the existing building extends beyond the rear elevation of number 292 Joel Street, the proposal would increase the height of the building within the same location to 4 metres. Given the lack of separation distance and the bulk scale and massing of the new building, the proposed development would result in detrimental harm upon the visual amenities and privacy of neighbouring properties. Having assessed the floor plans, it is clear that the development would provide inadequate levels of outlook for residents of the ground floor who rely on windows facing a fence less than 1 metre away for outlook, daylight and sunlight. The flats on the third floor has a small window in the living area which would fail to provide adequate light levels to serve the units. There is a shortfall in amenity space provision of approximately 211 square metres, with some of the balconies being too small to be considered usable. In addition, the proposal fails to take into consideration the inclusive design policies and would therefore fail to provide appropriately accessible living accommodation. Turning to parking, the application site is located within an area subject to a PTAL rating of 1B, 0 being the lowest and considered very poor levels of sustainability, and 6 being the highest and most sustainable locations. As such, there is a realistic reliance upon the car as a main mode of travelling to and from the site. The development should provide between 12 and 17 spaces. However, the proposal indicates 8 spaces would be provided, resulting in a shortfall of at least 4 spaces. This shortfall could result in parking being displaced onto the public highway, which is unacceptable and would be detrimental to the local highway network. To summarise, officers have set out 10 reasons for refusal within the main body of the committee report, which demonstrates that the proposal would introduce a building which would result in a detrimental harm upon the heritage asset and the street scene, and failed to provide adequate levels of living accommodation for future occupants, including housing standards for accessible people. The proposal does not provide a contribution to family-sized housing, for which there is an identified need for across the borough, and would result in detrimental harm upon the local highway network and the amenities of neighbouring properties, as well as increasing the high probability of flooding in this area. No benefits have been put forward by the applicant which could outweigh the potential harm identified by officers. As such, the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much for taking us through that, Chris. Now we have a petition for this particular item, so we have got...
Chris, can I see the picture again? That's especially 31 Reading Drive, please.
This one?
Yeah.
You okay with that? Okay, thank you. Right, so this is our one and only petition item this evening, so we do have speaking rights. So I'm going to invite Paul Avakio, is that correct? If you'd like to come and take a seat. And before we start, I'll just give you an indication as to how it all works. So you'll see in front of me a traffic light system there. So you are allowed 5 minutes to address the committee. For 4 of those minutes, you'll be in green. For the final 5th minute, it will be in amber. And when we get to 5, I'm sure you've practiced. But if you get to the 5th minute and it goes red, then I will politely bring you to a halt. Members may be asking you some questions afterwards. So, but that's part of the process. So when you're ready, if you could just press the button in the middle of your microphone and we'll start the clock.
So, Mr. Chairman, councillors and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to come and represent the petition against the demolishing and redevelopment of Hayden House that my wife, Nadine Avakio, the lead petitioner, and I put together and sought views and signatures. I am Paul Avakio, a resident for 17 years at number 29 Deerings Drive, and my property's back garden is adjacent to the existing car park for Hayden House. I can view the existing building from my garden and back bedroom and was disappointed that the original planning that went in was not even classified as major and failed to mention the impact on my property. I'm also a committee member and director of Eastcote Lawn Tennis Club and therefore can see the negative impact that the development would have on the area. Firstly, I would like to thank Carl Dave, the case officer, and Chris, the work you've done there. Thank you. It's excellent and detailed work that the planning department has done in this case, so thank you. The residents of Deerings Drive, Kaduna Close and adjacent properties in Joel Street were delighted to see the 10 refusal recommendations that the planning department had stated and their recommendation to refuse this planning permission. I would also like to thank our councillor, our ward councillor Nick Dennis, for taking the time to come and meet myself and other residents at the property so he could see the privacy impact to our home and surrounds. I believe he also made his comments known in writing. In addition, I thank the people who wrote the 47 written objections, including Eastcote Conservation Panel, the Ryship Northwood and Eastcote Local History Society, and Eastcote Lawn Tennis Club. On the Nextdoor app, which where I post information about the development and the petition, we had some 4,000 plus views and 30 odd comments, as this development is something that people are passionately against. Our petition mentions 5 areas of concern. Number 1, development is out of character with the surrounding area. There are no 4-storey buildings around, and I think this sets a precedent that we don't really want to have anymore. The insufficient parking for 13 flats with 8 spaces. This means we'll have overflow parking in Joel Street, Deerings Drive and Kaduna Close, which is already busy on a Friday night with Eastcote Cricket Club and weekends daytime with the tennis club and Jungle Monkeys, which is a soft play area. With Jungle Monkeys itself, people drop off and pick up their children for parties on the hour, at that hour. And so the congestion around the area is really bad, and it's without this development happening as well. I mean, it's bad now. Anyone parking outside Hayden House, i.e. for deliveries or the overflow parking, will immediately build up congestion on Joel Street, as it is so narrow at that point. Number 3, safeguarding and well-being of existing residents. There are planned roof gardens looking to surrounding homes and gardens on Deerings Drive, Joel Street and Wentworth Drive, which affects privacy and potential safeguarding of our children and vulnerable adults. Number 4, the living standards for future residents. Again, as it was mentioned, there is insufficient natural lighting, there's no outdoor space, there's no garden or play area, and that will affect the mental health and living conditions of the people in these flats. And 5, and lastly, the impact of a large building project on existing residents. the environmental area and potential Joel Street bottlenecks for a busy thoroughfare used by the 282 bus and ambulances from the nearby ambulance station in Northwood Hills. A note on the flooding concerns. At the tennis club, we suffered 2 catastrophic flooding events in the last 7 years that the council and flooding agencies have now helped to mitigate. We've worked hard to prevent the floods, and seeing the planning officer's report, are disappointed that this development could have a further detrimental effect on the preventative measures that we have all taken. I acknowledge that this development had planning permission granted previously, and that was probably a taster for this demolition and redevelopment planning request to come about. If the committee today, following the planning officer's advice, can turn this permission down, we are fully expecting a new request that we will consider, and if required, we will remobilise with the same vigour as we have on this one. That said, this has created a lot of strain and worry on my wife and I and other residents who are with me, and others that aren't. I hope that the committee today will endorse the planning officer's refusal recommendation, and I thank you all for your diligent work as a committee what you put in to protect the residents' rights. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and within time, so that's good. Okay, right, if you, thank you on behalf of the committee for addressing us this evening. Your points, I'm sure, will be taken on board. Now, a chance for members to ask you questions, and I can see Councillor Chamdale indicating.
Thank you, Chairman. You mentioned something about the floods. When were these floods?
So one was definitely on the Brexit vote day, which probably we should know. It's something in 2016. That day we had a flash flood in June. Was it June? And actually for the tennis club, the courts were destroyed. They all bubbled up. And we've identified a ditch further up past the cricket club that wasn't being maintained very well. It is now maintained, and some work has been done. There's also been some work done at the bottom of the opposite the tennis club. There's some ditches there that have been improved. There's a pond there that now acts as a pond. I think it was a pond before, and it was used as a bike trail. We've also implemented a whole lot of stuff at the tennis club as well. The actual flooding came as far up Deering's Drive. It didn't quite get to me. I'm number 29. It got up to number 30, but it was quite substantial. It did dissipate. We claimed on our insurance, and we got the courts changed. Unfortunately, we now can't get insured. And then 2 years later, I think it was 2 years later, we had another catastrophic flood. Same thing happened, but this time we were able to rescue the courts. And we've worked quite closely with the council and the Flood Protection Agency to try and prevent any more of this happening. We haven't had that rainfall. Interesting, it was June. It was a kind of this weather, I think, where suddenly the ground was quite hard. And because you've got Northwood Hills at the top, you've got Eastcote, and you've got Cuckoo Hill, it all kind of comes down in that place. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from members for our lead petitioner this evening? Okay, no, thank you very much. And again, thank you for taking the time to address us this evening. Appreciate that, thank you. Okay, right, have we got anybody here from the applicant or agent? I don't think so. Any written submission or anything? No?
No, Chairman.
Okay, right, on that basis then we can move straight to the debate. We've heard from officers, we've heard from the applicant, so now it's over to us to deliberate and ask any questions of officers. Councillor Chamdale.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and welcome back to the Planning Committee for me. And the first application, 10 refusal reasons. Never in my life have I seen that many. It's not a good development. It's unwanted. It's not being thought out. It doesn't meet policy, and I don't think that we should waste too much time on this. But there was a couple of things. One, I didn't find anything about disabled access. If officers could sort of comment on that, please.
You okay for that, Chris? Go for it.
Yeah, I probably won't be able to direct you to where it is in the report, but I know that the accessibility officer did raise the issue. I think he raised 6 or 7 points in his comments. One of them was the lack of a suitable access lift. The other one was step-free access. Just find the page number for you. Reason for refusal 9, sorry. So the comments from the access officer have been packaged up into a reason for refusal which relates to the accessible policies. So what you won't find in the policies is the specific reason for why we've made the decision to refuse the application based on accessible standards, but they are set out within the page 43 of the case officer's report. Thanks, Ed.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Chamdale. Councillor Dott, followed by Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question, it's just a clarity basically. On page 20, paragraph 3, it's saying about something air source heat pumps, right? And according to that, there is no reference for the noise impact assessment. But if we go to page 29, there is sufficient information has been provided for noise report. So my question is, can we use that noise assessment for both purpose, or it's separately from the air source heat pumps?
You want to take that, Bandit?
I can. I think the air source heat pumps, I guess they would come in different varieties. So you can actually, the reason it's not a reason for refusal is because you can condition to make sure that the noise levels generated from an air source heat pump can then be approved by the council prior to them being installed. So it's not really a reason for refusal, but I assume that the noise assessment that's been done is about the impact on the residential units rather than from the air source heat pumps. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dott. I've got Councillor Gill, followed by Councillor Chamdale.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick one about the 4-storey buildings there. I know that's unprecedented for the area and quite unique. Is there anything that's actually 3 stories there, or are most properties just 2-storey?
So I did do a sweep of the local area, and the closest 3-storey is down at the Parade of Shops in Eastcote, and then when you travel north, I guess towards Northwood Hills, but there really isn't anything that I could find and see that was beyond the 2-storey height.
So it'll stand out like a small farm as well, wouldn't it? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gill. Councillor Chamdale. Rita Chamdale, that is. I'll get my Chamdales right this evening. Okay, go for it.
Thank you, Chairman. Just referring to page 38 and 39 on the external amenity space provision. On page 9 it says, the development as a whole performs poorly in terms of external amenity space provision. And coming back to our lead petitioner also saying that the living standards for residents, this would be impacted. Would this not be another grounds for refusal?
Good question. Chris?
Yeah, I just need to look at the actual reason for refusal. So I think reason for refusal, it does form part of reason for refusal 6. So the living standards, when we discuss living standards and we look at the assessment of living standards, we're not just looking at the internal space standards, we're actually looking at the overall amenity provision. So policy DMHB 18 is in there, and that actually relates to amenity space provision. Yeah, thank you.
If I can just come in there, I think what we're seeing here, we've seen a couple of examples when there's so many sort of clashes here that the refusal reasons are encompassing so much, which also includes the amenity space and the point that we raised earlier on. But are you happy with that, Councillor Chamdale? Or do you think it should be a specific?
I would say it should be specific because I wasn't aware it was in that. So if I wasn't aware, would the public be aware of that as well?
I mean, we have seen amenity spaces. It's a unique refusal reason, but I think we'll be guided by officers on this one.
I think there is a public open space contribution which has been agreed, and that would offset any requirement for on-site under provision of amenity space. What we're saying is that the actual design of this space is unacceptable, not necessarily the actual level of provision, because the provision is balanced out by the fact that they've agreed to pay a financial contribution towards open space.
And if I can jump in, what we're going to do with the refusal reason in the event of an appeal is to put all of those mix all of those things up into a pot to say to the inspector that it's not just one aspect, it's all of them, and that's why it's badged as a single reason for refusal. It adds a little bit more weight to why it really is inappropriate to put future residents into a space that is not just too small, has no adequate amenity space, some of which has only a roof light, others look out onto a fence which is within a metre. So all of those make a stronger weighted argument together because we're dealing with the ground floor and the third floor apartments together.
I think what I'm hearing here is that breaking it away you think would dilute it
Possibly.
to a point, but I think what we need to be, if committee is satisfied that it's in there and it will be considered, should an appeal come forward on this one. Are you happy with that, Councillor Chamdale?
I'm guided by you, Chairman, and the
Okay.
officers, so if it's not going to dilute it and make the case stronger, I'm happy.
Okay. Did you want to come in there with anything, Chris?
I was just going to say we could retain the condition, the reason for refusal, and we could just add in a piece of text which specifically referred to amenity space as well.
So gardens and
yeah.
balconies.
Balconies, yeah. So
Yes, I think it's really important, especially with mental health being quite a strong issue, that we ensure that we build, if we, any future developments do take into account our residents' mental health well-being as well.
yeah,
So I think I would like that.
I think we can reference it within the reason for refusal.
Having a good external amenity space is really important, as you've pointed out there, Councillor. Okay, I've got a couple of people indicated. I've got Councillor Gill followed by Councillor Dotts. This one's generated a bit of interest tonight, this one, and Councillor Roy Chamdale afterwards.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think there's enough scope there now for me to propose officers' recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dotts.
Yeah, same as Councillor Gill, because this is, for me, this is inappropriate application, and we have so many reasons against this application. I'm happy to second.
Okay. Thank you both, councillors. Councillor Chamdale, I think I know what you was going to say, but
I was, but I don't mind. No, same for the officers. I think I'm just looking on the addendum sheet. You put down item 6. That's supposed to be item 7, yeah? Okay. Sorry, just to be a little pedantic. Thank you.
okay, I'm not seeing any other members indicate. We are moved and seconded. We haven't had any amendments to any of the conditions. So can I have a show of hands?
We have had one request for reason for refusal 6 to add in balconies and
correct.
gardens.
Yeah, you are correct. So yeah, we have a slight amendment. Thank you for pointing that out. We have a slight amendment to condition 6, but we're moved and seconded on that basis. So can I have a show of hands, please, to refuse item 7 this evening? Okay, that is unanimous. Obviously, minus Councillor Cawthorne, who wasn't in the debate. So that's 6 unanimous. I can confirm this evening then, agenda item 7 is refused. Thank you very much for a good debate, everybody. Councillor Chamdale, could you kindly ask Councillor Cawthorne to... You're closest to the door. So whilst we're inviting Councillor Cawthorne back into the room...
Okay, so which one is it?
This is from NCP Car Park.
Which number is it?
Yeah, you can go. Thank you. Unless you wanted to stay, of course, Oh, right. Okay, let's just let the room settle down a little bit. Let Councillor Cawthorne get into his chair. Okay, we can move on now to agenda item 8 this evening, which is Heathrow Flight Path NCP car park on the Bath Road in Sipson. Who's taken us out on this one?
That would be me.
You again, Chris.
Yes.
Okay, over to you.
Not twice. Thank you, Chairman. Item 8 relates to the redevelopment of the former NCP car park for industrial use. Before I go through the presentation, I'd like to direct members to the addendum. We do have 2 addendum items which are to update conditions. The first is to amend condition 5 to remove the urban greening factor section, as there is no prescribed standard within the London plan for urban greening to result in a specific score for B2 and B8 development. And also an update to the noise condition to amend the condition to reflect plant noise rather than background noise. Thank you. In terms of the description of development, it reads as the demolition of the existing car park and redevelopment of the industrial site, use class B2, storage and distribution, use class B8, and or light industrial, use class EG3, purposes with ancillary office space, landscaping, car parking, servicing access arrangements. The amended plan section that you see in brackets is just to record the fact that amended plans were received and a reconsultation undertaken on the 18th of the 5th, 23. Here you have the location plan. The application site is located on the north of the A4 Bath Road and adjacent to the M4 Spur Tunnel Road, which is to the east of the site. So where you notice a small bridge just on the right hand side of the plan in front of you, that actually oversells the M4 Spur Tunnel Road. To the north of the site is a site known as Douglas Webb House, which benefits from planning consent for a 6-storey 302-bedroom hotel. To the east of the site are the rear gardens of the residential properties within Sipson Way. I've just noticed that plan is actually an opposite way round to how I've just read it. So actually you'll see on the western side of that plan, which is the left, are the properties in Sipson Way, and to the east you will see the M4 Spur Road. Here you have a constraints plan. As indicated on the constraints plan, the application site is located within the air quality management area, an air quality focus area, an archaeological priority zone, and a critical drainage area, as well as flood zone 1. The site has most recently been operated by NCP as an open air car park, with the main access provided by a bridge which oversells the M4 Spur Road. However, it should be noted that the site benefits from consent for a new access off Bath Road to the southern corner of the site. So where you see the Bath Road just at the bottom of the red edge site plan, there is actually just to the right hand corner of that section, there is existing consent for a new vehicle access, turn in left and turn out left off of Bath Road. The proposal is to construct a new industrial warehouse housing building split into 4 individual units with associated office space, loading bays, parking and the retention of the consented new access off of Bath Road. The proposed building would measure 11.7 metres in height, 160 metres in width and 56 metres in depth. I will take you through the proposed plans. So here you just have an overview, an aerial view of what was an existing car park. The car park has now become redundant, so it's been cleared. Here you have a proposed site plan. To the north of that plan you will see a green edge which bounds the application site along with the gardens, the rear gardens of the properties within Sipson Way. To the south of the plan you'll see the M4 Spur Road. To the west of the plan you'll see the Bath Road and the new access, which is to be retained as part of this development. And then to the east of the plan is the site to the north, which I referred to earlier, which is Douglas Webb House. Here you have Unit 10, which is the office plan. The offices sit slightly above the a section of the building, which is the main warehouse. Here you've got the main warehouse ground floor plan, Unit 10 roof plan, Unit 10 proposed elevations, Unit 20, which is the second of the 2 units, which is the office plan, warehouse plan, roof plan, proposed elevation with the same appearance. Unit 130 is set out in pretty much exactly the same fashion, warehouse ground floor plan and a roof plan, proposed elevations, and then finally Unit 140 ground floor, office plan, warehouse plan, roof plan, and proposed elevations. Here you have a vehicle tracking plan, which shows vehicles which are able to navigate around the site, as well as in through the entrance and out through the exit, navigating around some of the parked vehicles and loading bays which are directly outside of the units. Vehicle tracking plan for different type of vehicle movement, which is HGV. This is just extended into the site, but it's effectively the same tracking plan. An LGV plan in the same fashion. Refuse vehicle. Here you have a proposed external finishes plan, which indicates the different types of surfaces, obviously green being soft surface, red being hard surface, and grey being another hard surface but directly outside of the units themselves. soft landscaping proposal, indicating the tree enhancement along the boundary shared with the residential properties to the north of that plan. And here we have some CGI. So I'll talk about this in a bit more depth in a moment, but the scheme has been through some revisions. You'll see on the plan to your bottom left, you have a CGI which indicates the building as it's viewed between two properties in Sipson Way. The red outline that you see above indicates the reduction in the size of the height of the building, which was achieved through negotiations during the actual planning application assessment. To the right is a more distant view taken from a road which is adjacent to Sipson Way, and again you can see the red edged outline which had indicated where the previous height would have extended to. With regards to the principle of development, the development plan provides support for industrial, logistics and services development. The proposed designation of the nearby sites for locally significant industrial status demonstrates that Bath Road is an appropriate location for industrial, logistics and service uses as proposed here. The principle of the land to the north on the A4 Bath Road providing industrial and logistics floor space has therefore been supported. The site also falls within the Bath Road employment area, and the proposal which would provide between 122 and 238 new jobs would contribute to the employment within this designated area. As such, the principle of development is considered to be acceptable. Turning to the design of the development, the proposed development would result in an element of change to the street scene, as shown on those images there, when viewed from surrounding roads such as Sipson Way and Bath Road. Furthermore, the initial proposal would have resulted in the redundancy of the access bridge, and concerns were raised regarding the safety and impact upon the character and appearance of the area this could have had. Upon discussion with the applicant, a set of revised plans have been submitted which demonstrate a reduction in the overall height of the building and a change of the materials to improve the external appearance and reduce the impact upon the character and appearance of the street scene. The plans also illustrate the retention of the access bridge for staff use only, with secured gated access at either end. As such, the concerns raised by the Council's Urban Design Officer, which are set out within the report, have been addressed. In terms of neighbour impact, the new building would be set between 8 and 12 metres away from the neighbouring boundary, shared with properties within Sipson Way, and benefit from a building-to-building separation distance of between 14 and 23 metres. The applicant has also submitted a daylight and sunlight assessment which indicates that the proposed building would not result in a reduction in daylight and sunlight to these properties. To protect the visual amenities of these neighbouring properties, the development would retain and enhance the planting along the shared boundary, adding further density to the green screening. Turning to highways, the proposal would result in an additional and a change in the type of trips which are to access the site via the retained new access of Bath Road. The new access would be retained as a left in and left out, as was consented in 2021. The level of trips to be generated and type of trips, and therefore their route in which they will take to access the site, has been reviewed by the Council's Highways Officer, who has raised no objection, providing the applicant agrees to a contribution towards delivering the improvements resultant of the submitted road safety audit. Noting an objection raising concerns with the possibility of vehicle stacking on Bath Road, the applicant has submitted a set of revised tracking plans, which you've seen, which have been reviewed by the Council's Highways Officer, who has raised no objection over vehicle stacking. Finally, as mentioned earlier, the existing access bridge, which, apart from the two entrance points, which will be locations for the new security fob gates, the bridge is owned by National Highways. Upon review of the plans, which include the retention of the use of the bridge by staff only, National Highways support the scheme, providing the bridge is secured from public use due to safety concerns. As the plans indicate the provision of gates with an access fob entry, no condition to secure this is required. In summary, the principle of an industrial scheme in this location is supported. The scheme would not result in detrimental harm upon the street scene, the amenities of local residents or the local highway network. The proposal would result in enhancements to ecology, landscaping and employment which are to be secured by condition, as well as financial contributions towards healthy streets, air quality, employment and construction training, and carbon reduction. For the reasons discussed and those set out in the main body of the report, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that, Chris. Before we go to the debate, because there are no speaking rights in this, there's no petition, I think Mandy wants to just say a couple of points.
I just wanted to note that the images that you're looking at, I know Chris has pointed out the bottom left and the bottom right. The images at the top, the yellow block is the consented scheme that's to the north of the application site. So I don't know if you can...
I don't think that works at the moment.
Does it not work?
Yeah,
Okay,
no.
so the yellow building is not the application site, it's the site to the north that has planning permission but has not yet been built.
I might have an image of it, actually. Yeah, that's it there.
That's it rendered. The yellow block is just the way in which it was depicted in the application. So just to clarify, the building that's the subject of the application is if you go to the other image, it is the one that's got a white band, green, grey. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, no, that's really helpful. And again, members, I just ask if you just draw your attention to the addendum that Chris pointed out earlier on, because there's some changes there that might inform the debate.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Cawthorne, you was quick off the blocks there. Straight back from your time outside and straight back into the debate.
That's because I had a break, see, while you...
Over to you.
Okay, I suppose three quick things. I mean, I think this looks like very good use of this site. Certainly it's consistent with policy, so I think there's no issue there. But I do have one or two points to make and a couple of questions as well. On page 105 in the first paragraph there, we talk about what the LPA considers it's probable that drivers will do in terms of driving past and accessing the site. I think nevertheless the measures that are proposed to reduce the risk of that in some way are sensible, because I would be loath for us to make assumptions, because that can take us down the wrong path and result in problems. So that's good. A couple of questions I want to ask. One is on page 60, and it relates to the question of noise. We're all familiar very much with the Bath Road, and I've used it many times, and of course it's very noisy, as we know. But we nevertheless talk about the council's noise officer who has raised no objection subject to a condition restricting noise levels in comparison with background noise levels. That sounds all well and good, but I just wonder how that works in practice in this context, really. That's one of my questions. And my second one, just leaping about a bit, this is page 105, second paragraph. We talk about the number of additional trips we generated by the development will result in an insignificant impact on the local highway network. I just wonder what we're using as the base on. Are we using its former use as a car park when it was in operation as a car park? Are we taking it as now when presumably little or nothing is happening? So I'm just wondering what we're using as a base on there. So they are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cawthorne. I think just to paraphrase there, just if officers could pick up around noise, and then the chip generation, what was the baseline used to determine that there's little impact? So I think that'd probably be one for Alan. But Chris, you want to pick up the first one?
Yeah, just on noise. So the condition which is recommended by the noise officer within the report has actually been slightly amended within the addendum. So it's to reflect a specific measurement above plant level noise rather than what is set out in the report, which is background noise. I think one thing we do need just to be mindful of is that this is beneath the flight path. It's also next to quite a busy road, so probably the more appropriate noise level to be measured would actually be plant noise rather than background noise, which could actually end up being significantly higher. Does that answer the question?
I don't know if you want to come back on that, Councillor.
Partially, but I'm still not sure quite how it works in practice, though, in terms of monitoring and all the rest of it.
So in terms of monitoring, the noise level generated by the plant that's installed cannot exceed certain levels that are set within the condition that are prescribed. And therefore, should a resident, because the residents of Sipson Way, we've talked about separation distances of building to building, not being ideal, they could have been greater, but I don't think it just wasn't feasible. If they raise concerns about the noise that they feel is generated, they wouldn't hear the vehicles. The buildings act as their own barrier to the car park and the loading bays. But if the plant, which is usually on a roof, generates a certain amount of noise that disturbs Ipswich Way, they can come to the council and we will enforce if there is a breach against the condition that's in the addendum.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you very much for picking up those points. I've got Councillor Chamdell. Roy Chamdell.
Thank you, Chair. Is the impact on neighbours that I've been looking at? Because obviously the urban design officer wasn't very complimentary about that, because in terms of what was in front of us. Have we got any sort of diagrams and drawings on what the actual site's going to look like? I know they've sent emails to members, I believe. I don't know if anybody's received any, with CGIs and all sorts. Because I still think there is a significant impact to neighbours. If officers could comment on that, please.
I think so. There's two parts to the answer. So I know the initial set of plans which was submitted to the council resulted in an objection from the urban design officer. Unfortunately, that urban design officer has left the council. However, I assessed the revised drawings in conjunction with his concerns. There was improvements made in terms of the setting back of the building, so the building has been set away, further away from the neighbouring boundary. I mean, at its smallest distance, I believe it's 14 metres from the rear of the properties which are based in the northern section of the site, but it does extend between 23 and 28 metres from the rear elevation, which is where you would take that's where the most appropriate measurement would be taken when you looked at impact. So if you look at the plan which is on screen now, the properties which are to the rear of units 110 benefit from the greatest separation distance, and that's between 23 and 28 metres. Where the pinch point gets closer is towards the corner of 140, where it reduces to approximately about 14 metres. But a daylight and sunlight report has been undertaken and concludes that there would be no adverse impacts upon daylight and sunlight, which is predominantly what we would look for this type of development. The real main concern for the urban design officer was the height of the building. So the height of the building has been reduced by 1.7 metres, I believe. Also, the roof form has changed. So the roof form is now a pitched roof. So the 1.7 metre, so the total height, which is around 11.7 metres in height, is actually taken from the middle of the pitch. So the middle of the pitch would be towards the centre line of the roof. So that, in fact, would actually be even further away than the eaves height, which would be significantly smaller.
Does that pick up your point, Councillor?
Thank you. Now, the other one was about the bridge, but I've just, with the controls in place, I mean, who would actually manage those controls? Because it's fine having controls in place, then all of a sudden, it goes by the wayside, and by the nature of what it says in the report, it's quite frightening. So I would like some comment on that as well, please. Have we got some sort of condition in it that they have to look after the bridge?
Chris is ready to leap into action on that one.
Yeah, so the only reason why I'm ready, because this has been a massive subject for the LPA to negotiate with both the applicant and National Highways. We spent kind of months going back and forward over what sort of provision could be put in place to help retain the bridge first. What we do have, in fact, is two separate landowners. So you've got the landowner who is responsible. If you see directly at the south of the bottom of the plan, which is on screen, the applicant is actually responsible and owns that small section of the site, which is directly at the bottom. The main part of the bridge, which oversells the M4, is owned by Highways England, and then the part which actually lands within the applicant's site is owned by the applicant. So what we've been able to do is secure the provision of some key fob gates, which are set out actually on the landscaping plan, and there's details of how they would be secured and maintained on that plan. But the actual maintenance of the bridge will remain with National Highways, in which case the only condition which they've asked us to place on the application actually related to the provision and the design of the gates, which has already been agreed because it's on the landscaping plan. So no further condition was required.
So the maintenance of the access gates is included in that condition, is what you're saying?
It's included on the plan. So the responsibility for the maintenance of those gates will remain with the landowner, which is the applicant in this application.
Would we want to be a little bit more specific in any condition that says, you know, we want to... I'll let Councillor Chamdale come in, because I'm sure he's going to make the same point.
Well, no, absolutely, Chairman, you're absolutely right. I think it needs to be, we dot the I's and tick the T's. It can't be left that open as it's in the plans. It's got to be conditioned, because that's an absolute must then. They've got no options.
So, Councillor Chandal, as long as you're happy, that would be a compliance condition. So we have the details. The condition would state that they must maintain the access in accordance with the submission and the plans that we already have. But it would be a standalone condition.
You put it far better than I can. Well done. I agree.
So that's a slight amendment to that.
Yeah.
To that. Okay. Right. We got so excited talking about noise earlier on that we forgot to bring in Alan to talk about Councillor Cawthorne's earlier question around trip generation. So I don't know if you wanted to pick that up. You know, I think the question was trip generation, the impact. What was the baseline? Because I think the report says minor impact.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Alongside the application, the applicant provided a transport assessment, and that included the results of traffic surveys conducted over a 7-day period back in 2019 when the site was in use. So they provided a reliable baseline. Thank you, Chairman.
Was there any differential between the different... I mean, it would have been the car park then. Now it's going to be LGVs, HGVs. Is there any differential on that?
Yes, Chairman, there will be an uplift in trips, but given the site's location on the Bath Road, it's considered insignificant against the background of existing flows.
Okay. Members might have one or two questions on that. Councillor Gill?
Yeah, just on that, I'm just trying to get my head around what was the previous use of the car park? Was it long stay, or was it for staff of the airport? Do we know the specific use of it?
Yeah, so when the access from Bath Road was consented, it was consented on the basis that the car park would operate as a long stay car park rather than short stay. Obviously there is a difference in the amount of trips which are generated by a short stay, long stay, so I can understand the question.
Okay, no, thank you. Right, any other members with any other comment? Councillor Gaelic?
Just needing clarification here, because the hours are set for weekdays and Saturdays, but there's one section here that says that there might be instances when they might need approval to carry out construction outside those prescribed hours. Is there a limit of a number of those instances? Because obviously it will be disturbance.
So I think that's linked to the construction management plan, I guess. Can you pick up Councillor Gaelic's point there, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, the construction management plan is... The operating hours for construction are taken from the considerate contractors, so they're fairly uniform across most development. Within the construction management plan, there would be an element of there would be a requirement for them to submit details regarding construction noise, which would also be enforced by the Noise Protection Act, I believe, Section 61. So there are, not only is the planning department able to enforce because there's a condition of construction management plan in place, but also the council's antisocial behaviour team would also be able to take on any complaints as well.
Does that pick up your point, Councillor?
I just want to know if there's any guidance on the number of those instances when they can ask for to work outside those hours.
To the best of my knowledge, there isn't any such guidance, and they would be guided by us giving them permission. But it usually only happens when sort of piling needs to take place for a very long time, so usually at the beginning. I can't imagine there would be exceptional reasons why they would work outside of hours once they have done the groundworks of a development, so it's usually only for a short period.
Yeah, I think what Councillor Gaelic's getting at is that we've debated construction management plans for various applications on this committee. It's just that just want to try and safeguard that it isn't become a regular instance where we have sort of out of hours working. I think all committee members understand that there are certain aspects of construction that might require that, but we just want to be making sure that any neighbouring residents are safeguarded, that it doesn't become a regular thing. Yeah, good point. So I've got Councillor Dott.
Thank you, Chair. My question is on employment side. I'm not sure whether the committee have authority to put conditions on the employment side of it, but I believe this project would provide more than 200 jobs. So is it worth putting condition like preference to be given to Hillingdon residents for these jobs?
I'm not sure this in the remit of this committee to sort of indicate where employment. I think we should just welcome the fact that there is additional employment. But I will turn to our legal advisor here. Is there any merit in Councillor Dott's point that he's made there?
I note your point, but I would like to side by the report as it's made, and it's beyond the remit of today's discussion as to whether we can put conditions on employment. The fact that there is employment is a good start, I think.
Yeah, please do.
So we have secured a head of term, so head of term number 4. I don't have the correct page number, so I can't tell you which page number it is, but under the recommendation, there's an employment training for construction phase secured. So during the construction phase, we will look to get local persons hopefully from the job centre list, into local construction employment, as well as perhaps through apprenticeships. So that's a standard that we normally apply. In terms of employment at the end of a project, we only really have the ability to do that in hospitality, because that's the only bit in our planning policies that we have at the moment. We could expand it through a revision, but yeah, so we do have some. Page 60. Yeah, page 60.
Thank you. Councillor Chamdale.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we've had a good discussion on this, and I welcome the developer actually making changes to not the best situation, but a manageable situation. Not quite sure about the movement in cars. I don't know whether we got the information of how many car movements there were previously. But apart from that, I think it is a welcome development, and I'd like to formally propose to go with the officer's recommendation.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Chamdale. Councillor Cawthorne.
I was just going to do that, so I'll second if I may.
Okay. Good. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other members indicate, so we do have a couple of amendments to make here. So I'll draw members' attention to the addendum, which is a slight change to condition 5, and we've got a new noise condition added, plus we've also added the gate maintenance condition to the existing landscaping condition. So that's what we're voting on, everybody. So can I have a show of hands for approval for this item? So that's unanimous, 7 out of 7. So agenda item 8 this evening is approved. Once again, committee members and officers, some very good debate and scrutiny on that particular item. Thank you. Right, we will now move on to agenda item 9, and that note I can welcome Glenn to the team. Welcome. For anybody watching on YouTube, we did say earlier on that Glenn might be joining us a bit throughout the meeting. Glenn is our Head of Legal Services, Glenn Egan, that is. So that members, so that people watching at home know who the gentleman who's just joined us is. Okay, right, agenda item 9. Richard, is that you? Although it says Chris there. No, don't worry. Don't worry. Just trying to test me. So, Richard, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Just before I start my presentation, I just noticed on the front part of the committee agenda tonight, just where we list the titles of the reports that are coming up, just the description is incorrect on item 9. It reads 15 flats, that should be 13. But the description is perfectly correct in the actual main officer's report. Can I also refer members to the addendum sheet, which mentions the need for an additional condition requiring the submission of a contamination remediation scheme. However, as works are far advanced on the building and it is nearing completion, I just want to suggest that the condition, instead of referring to no development shall take place, well, no further development shall take place, if this could be changed to within 3 months of this permission. The reason for that, we hadn't had this condition previously on any of the consents granted on site, and the fact that the workers on site finishing off the scheme seems a bit onerous and unreasonable to require them to down tools just in the light of the revisions that were involved in the scheme before us tonight, which I'll get onto later. There's also a couple of corrections that are needed to the wording of 2 of the conditions in the report. Condition 14 is a similar issue. It requires a submission of a scheme for the control of dust and emissions from construction and demolition work. But this condition has already been discharged as part of the previous permission. So I'm suggesting that this condition could be changed to a compliance condition. It should be carried out in compliance with the approved details. And also, as regards condition 21, the fire strategy, this refers to a revision of the fire strategy and to the revised statement. But these references to a revision should be omitted as the fire strategy hasn't been submitted as yet. So it's a new requirement to comply with policy. So if I just take you to the presentation. So yeah, this is for the erection of a residential building comprising 13 flats with associated parking, cycle storage, motorcycle parking, disabled parking and bin storage. So this is the location plan. Seeing Green Lane to the south of the red hatched area, and the London School of Theology is to the west of the site. And so I'll just take you on to this. Shows the constraints plan. You're seeing looking at a conservation area to the south of Green Lane, and the purple area above is the area special local character. So, yeah, this proposal is for a 4-storey block, which includes a basement lower ground level and the top floor contained within the roof space. An almost identical building has previously been approved, forming the subject of planning permissions granted in 2016, 2017, 2018 and 2020. These permissions involve the building comprising 8, 9, 12 and 15 units respectively. The only physical change proposed to the building is to its internal layout, with a unit being removed on its ground and first floors as compared to the last consented scheme for 15 units. And also propose alterations to the fenestration as compared to the consented scheme. These changes are not considered to be significant, particularly as a similar condition requiring the windows on the eastern side elevation of the building to be obscure glazed and fixed shut has been applied. The site layout, including parking and landscaping provision, has not altered. So if we just quickly run through the plans. So this is the proposed site layout, showing the building, the main building to the north there, with the access running along the eastern side. This is the proposed basement lower ground floor plan. 2 units at the top of the plan and parking shown to the south. And this is proposed ground floor plan. That contains 4 units. Again, this is a proposed first floor plan. Again, it contains 4 units. And this is the proposed second floor plan within the roof. That contains 3 units. So this is the front and eastern side elevation of the building. This shows the rear elevation to the top and the western side elevation from the bottom. And this shows the 25-degree line taken from adjoining the nearest residence adjoining window in Wellcott Place, I believe. So this shows a section showing the basement units and the relation to the surrounding ground levels. Again, this shows the proposed planting plan, which has been approved as part of the 15-unit scheme. You can see it shows retained trees along the boundaries. And again, this shows the southern half of the site, the proposed planting plan. So this shows the approved ground floor plan on the 8-unit scheme. Just as a comparison, this shows the front and eastern side elevation of the 8-unit scheme. So now we move on to the 9-unit scheme. Again, that's the ground floor plan, and that's the front and eastern side elevation, so it's almost identical. Again, this is moving on to the 12-unit scheme, ground floor plan again. And again, it's the proposed front and eastern side elevations that were approved. And finally, we move on to the last 15-unit scheme, and that's the consented ground floor plan. And that's the approved front elevation and the eastern side elevations again, so it's virtually identical to what's before us tonight. So, although the scheme does result in fewer units being provided on site as compared to the last consented scheme, it is considered that a reason for refusal based on the proposal not maximising the amount of development on site could not be sustained, given the surrounding spacious character of the area and in view of the previous planning history, which includes schemes with fewer units on site. The only other change is that on the previously consented scheme for 15 units, 2 of the units on the first floor were secured as discount market units. This scheme does not propose any affordable housing, and on reviewing the submitted financial viability assessment, the Council's independent assessors only identified a surplus of approximately £70,000 against the viability benchmark. However, the GLA's Affordable Housing SPG does contain a formula for calculating in lieu contributions based upon a proportion of market sales. On applying this, the LPA has calculated an in lieu sum of £320,000 for affordable housing, which the applicant has agreed to provide. It is considered that this alternative approach has enabled the LPA to secure a much greater sum to be spent on affordable housing elsewhere within the borough, and this represents a maximum reasonable level of in lieu contribution that the scheme can support, and the proposal would also be subject to a late-stage viability review, which may identify further contributions if the financial circumstances change. It is also noted that on the previously consented 15-unit scheme, it would also have been difficult to find a willing social landlord to take on the financial burden of only providing two affordable units within the block. So having regard to the changing policy framework and the requirement for major residential development proposals to make provision for new and enhanced public open space, an additional £32,000 contribution towards public open space has also been secured on the current scheme, which forms part of the Section 106 agreement. Therefore, the principle of the residential redevelopment of this site and its impacts on the building on the surrounding area and neighbours, traffic generation and parking provision, etc., have already been found to be acceptable. The application is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that, taking us through that, Richard. Did you want to add anything, Mandy?
I did want to add that I know that it's disappointing to see the loss of affordable housing, and we have been back and forth with the applicant, with our own consultants who only identified £70,000. So we do appreciate that it's unfortunate. The one thing I would add is that very recently these small developments of say between 12 to 20 units. The applicants are finding it extremely difficult to find registered providers who will take such small numbers of affordable housing units. We've got Legion House that came to us recently. I've got other examples of dialogue that I've had where registered providers are reluctant to take 2 units in a large scheme. It's not cost effective for an affordable housing provider to take such small numbers. So part of me wonders whether we might have seen this application come back to us anyway, and I think others are probably going to come forward. But it is disappointing, but I feel that we have negotiated a good sum for the affordable housing and the council building programme. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you for that, Mandip, and I think I echo the sentiment, and I can see some of the faces around the committee. You know, it's never good that we have a situation where we've got a scheme in front of us which has reduced its affordable housing, but the upside to that is that we have got a pretty decent contribution that can be used elsewhere in the borough where it might actually be of more benefit at some point in the future. But that's an issue for members to maybe ask officers about. I'll also be minded to just draw members' attention to the quite extensive planning history, and where we got previously consented plans in place, and we just need to be mindful of that as well. So I've got Councillor Cawthorne followed by Councillor Chamdale to open the debate.
Thank you very much. Well, of course, it's our job to ask challenging questions on this committee, so I'm sure it will be no surprise to officers that I've got one or two around the affordable aspect. But first of all, I suppose it's an observation, a bit of a question really. I mean, as you say, there's an extensive planning history, but nevertheless this has been essentially substantially resubmitted to us on the basis that there are revised heads of terms that are being recommended around affordable housing. So I think I think your nod is fine with that, Mandy, but I've got that bit right. I do think the watching public need to understand how it is. And I hear all that's being said about lack of RSLs that are willing to take them on and viability, but actually I think there's a fair degree of scepticism, dare I say cynicism out there, frankly, when it comes to developers appearing, and it may not be entirely fair in this context, I'm not saying it generally, but I think there is a view that if developers can get away from obligations around providing affordable housing, they will. So I think if we're to agree to this recommendation this evening, it would help to have a little more of an explanation about the process by which these assessments are made, whether it's entirely independent, whether in fact there is any kind of open book approach when it comes to profit and loss and all the rest of it. Presumably there's we make an assumption about what's a reasonable return, I guess, for a developer. Just be helpful to understand that a little bit more fully, if that's okay. So I'm not saying I'm unhappy with it, but I think it needs a little bit more of an explanation, please.
Oh, you're talking to the wrong person. No. So the viability is based on the benchmark land value. Now, the problem, we have been back to our independent consultant, so the applicant has lodged to us a viability appraisal which has its numbers of profits, the cost analysis. We have taken that appraisal and we have passed it on to a third-party expert because we don't have the expertise in-house. That third party is independent. They work for the local planning authority. They do not work for the applicant. They have reviewed the submission, made their own recommendations. They probably don't tally with the applicant who possibly came in with a lower sum, but they have advised that based on what is a benchmark land value, because the site has planning permission for 9 units, 12 units and 15 units. Because of those consented schemes, the benchmark land value is increased quite significantly. So the value that you base your appraisal on is inflated almost artificially, but they do have those permissions in place. That is why our own consultant was only able to secure a surplus of £70,000. Now I know that I don't think that sounds right, and I was unwilling to bring the application to committee with a recommendation that we accept the loss of those 2 affordable units with just the £70,000. So we did try the alternative approach of using the GLA's formula, which does secure a higher sum. Now, I'll take you back to the 12-unit scheme that we've granted planning permission for on this site. Now, that secured an in-lieu contribution of £286,000. So it wasn't it's been assessed throughout. So the 9-unit scheme fell below the affordable housing threshold, so secured no affordable housing either on site or as a sum. The 12-unit scheme secured £286,000 in lieu contributions. The 15-unit scheme changed that monetary sum into 2 on-site affordable units. This 13-unit scheme will now secure £320,000. So the sum seems there or thereabouts in line with the viability SPG that the GLA produced. It's not, I feel like I want to say it's a numbers game and it's an expert talking to an expert, but the guidance is there from the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, so it's all based on a formulaic approach. And yes, the profit levels are set at, I want to say 15%, or they're negotiated in sort of going up to 20%. So our assessors will have made a review of what the applicants have decided is their profit level and adjusted it to be what we all agree as a borough to be appropriate. I hope that gives a little bit of background.
Thank you. Brief supplementary, if I may, Chairman.
You may indulge yourself, yes.
Did I, indulge me again, that's my word, isn't it? And did I hear correctly? So in due course, at an appropriate time, there will be a review of market conditions to determine whether in fact that is an appropriate, reasonable contribution in all the circumstances. Is that correct?
That is, so we are able to impose a late-stage review of the viability appraisal. So that is a head of term at the moment, so we're securing the lump sum of money, which we will bank in any instance. If the conditions get worse and actually the viability is worse, we won't be giving any money back. It will just mean the late-stage review will yield no surplus to add into the affordable housing pot. But hopefully market conditions improve and we should be able to secure some additional monies for affordable housing.
Okay, no, thank you, Councillor Caulfield. Councillor Chamdale.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, my question was on this late-stage review mechanism. How robust is it? I think you've answered it there, that we won't lose any more, and there's a possibility that we can gain some more. And an observation, if I were bought-in expert, I can only deliver 70,000, and we ourselves delivered 320. I think it sends a strong message. Maybe we should be looking at other experts. The parking on page 140, we're going to call it a one-off exception. Why? Could you tell me why it's there? If, just as a layperson, if somebody's offered me, I've never seen this in a planning application, where they've offered nearly double the amount of parking spaces, what are the concerns there? That's firstly. And secondly, back on about affordable housing on the local plan policy DM87. I read somewhere about a minimum of 35% of new homes on site of 10 or more. Could you just give me a little clarification on that, please? Thank you.
Okay, go for it.
There we go. Okay, so I will take affordable housing if you can take parking, Richard, is that all right? So with affordable housing, policy DMH7 does require the 35% to be submitted, to be provided on site, so that's affordable housing, unless there is a financial viability appraisal that the council receive to demonstrate that there isn't sufficient capacity to deliver the 35% on site. So that is what the applicant has almost triggered. He has said, I'm not going to deliver the 35% on site in accordance with DMH7 and has lodged the financial viability appraisal instead. As a result of the negotiations, we are securing the £320,000 for the affordable housing council-owned schemes. And I will pass over to Richard for parking.
Thank you, Mandip. As I said, I mean this scheme is nearing completion. In all honesty, I think we're just, sort of carrying out works on the roof at the moment. So it's very, very far advanced. Obviously, the level of car parking on this site has already previously been approved, albeit for the 15-unit scheme. A lot of that parking space is within the basement, which has already been constructed. Obviously, the highway engineer didn't raise any objections to keeping the same level of car parking, and it is very marginal. It's not going to contribute significantly to any traffic congestion on surrounding roads. So, as the report makes clear, I mean, this is a exception, but they've built it out in accordance with what had previously been granted permission for, and to say now that, oh no, you've got to remove two spaces when it's nearing completion seems a bit onerous and unreasonable.
If you wanted to come back.
Thank you, Chairman. No, just a bit of baldrick, maybe there's a cunning plan somewhere that we're going to reduce 2 units. We're going to give you additional 13 parking spaces. The baldrick that came out, is there a cunning plan behind this? Something else is going to crop. That's all it was. I just wondered why a developer would do that, where we see constantly and consistently people are trying to build as much as they can and to the limit, sort of into amenity space and all the rest. So I was just wondering how this is about, especially this is a nice neck of the woods as well.
I think Mandip's itching to get in to address that point, I think
I understand your point. It's unusual. Maybe it's appropriate, I guess, if you've identified it as a concern, that we restrict that all of the parking is only to serve the residents of the block. We don't want comings and goings from park and ride. I don't know what the term is. You get lots of parking on people's driveways, so perhaps that's something that might alleviate your concern. What is the additional parking space going to be used for? Is that okay?
Very good, thank you.
Okay. Any other raised hands? Councillor Gill.
Just wanted to see, with the electric vehicle parking provision, is there more provision this time than compared to the previous permission that was granted?
I believe it's the same provision. Yeah.
Good to hear. As you know, I love electric cars.
I think it exceeds standards.
Yeah. Councillor Chemdale.
Thank you, Chairman. I think with everything that I've heard so far, and with the condition that Mandip has suggested, I think it's a good fit. I think we should go with the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Councillor Dott? Okay. I think you need to press your mic so that the watching public can hear you then.
Oh, sorry about that.
Councillor Dott?
I said I'm happy to second it.
Okay. Good. Okay, we aren't moved and seconded. I am going to try and unravel the slight adjustments that we've had here, but I think I just also wanted to say that it's been a really good debate pushing, scrutinising the change to the affordable housing mix. This committee has quite a proud record of pushing as hard as it can within the guidelines and the policies and everything that we have to get as much affordable housing as we possibly can in this borough, and we've done a great job over time in doing that. So I think the fact is that we have got consent, we have followed the legal process, we have had the viability assessments, and we have got a significant contribution to be used elsewhere in the borough. Yes, it is disappointing that this scheme presented to us tonight does take away 2 physical units, but we have had that offset with a contribution. I think if we were to refuse this tonight, I'm not sure where we would end up. I don't know whether there's any legal advice that could be added into that. Glenn, no, there's nothing really.
Chairman, I don't think there's any basis for any refusal on this, but what I would say, if there's some justifiable concern from members about the mechanism of the review of the affordable housing and the viability assessment, if members wish to have additional reassurance on that, I see no reason why, when that review is carried out in a later stage, that can't be done in consultation with yourself for an additional element of challenge to any decision that officers might make there, Chairman.
Yeah, and I think we'll get that minuted, that point. And also, I'll let you come in a second, Councillor. For those of us that have sat on these committees over the years, we know that we've had these schemes come back, and it's sometimes a nice surprise that we see an increase in the affordable housing percentage or contribution as well. So we've got that mechanism, which is going to be done, and we'll, again, in consultation with myself, we'll make sure that we get the absolute maximum affordable housing contribution for this particular scheme. So, okay, so let's unravel what we've got here. So we've got a new condition on the addendum, which is now going to be slightly amended to reflect to within 3 months rather than no further development. We've got condition 21, which is the fire strategy condition. It refers to it in the papers, but that's not actually yet been submitted, has it? Is that what we're saying? So
The fire strategy hasn't been.
yeah, so that needs to be submitted. We've got an amendment to condition 14, which covers off. Remind me, Mandip.
The dust.
The dust suppression. Yep. And we've also got a new condition on the parking scheme, which will only be for residential purposes.
It's actually already in there, condition 16.
Okay.
So I'm going to propose no condition.
Okay, so the parking piece then, Councillor Chamdale, is covered off in condition 16, I'm being told by officers. And before we go, we are moved and seconded, but before we went to the vote, Councillor Chamdale, did you have a point you wanted to make?
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. I just want to say, I mean, in the press, there's much report about committees being conflict with developers and house builders. The time that I've been away from the committee, I'm rather sad, I do watch them. And I've seen, we're not developer friendly, we're good development friendly. I've seen the committee and officers, very difficult cases actually go deep into this. And I think as a committee, what I've seen so far and now will be part of, I think we should be proud because we deliver for the residents, really. And we do answer different questions within the rules and regulations. So I think this is, in Hillingdon we do have a very good working committee. I just want to raise that point.
Thank you, Councillor Chamdale. Right, so those are the just to clarify what we're going to be voting on. There was a couple of key points that we needed to tease out there, but we are moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands, please, for agenda item 9 approvals? So that's unanimous, 7 out of 7. I can confirm agenda item 9 is fully approved. Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of the meeting. A very warm meeting as well, I have to say. Sitting here with my jacket on, but right, so thank you very much to everybody who's been watching on YouTube this evening. Thank you very much to members for your scrutiny and questions, and thank you very much to officers for taking us through this evening and answering those questions. But on that note, I'll bring this meeting to a close and wish everybody a safe journey home and a good evening. Thank you.